Hey, it's Zax from Ready Check Pull, and I'm here to tell you about what's going on with Frost Death Knight and Shadowlands. I'll go over the biggest changes from BFA and then let you know how I think the spec is going to play out overall. Frost Decay actually hasn't changed too much from BFA. It's really only gotten things added to it rather than changed or replaced. So it still has the same core feel and rotation that it's had for at least the past 4 years. But now it's going to have a bit more flavor and utility, which is always nice. Frost is definitely still solid and enjoyable, but at this point I think people might be wanting some changes just to shake things up a little. There's still time for some of that to happen, but let's dive into the changes so far. So first and foremost, we've got a change that applies to all 3 Death Knight specs, and might be the most important change for all of them. Anti-Magic Zone is baseline now. It's a 2-minute cooldown that creates a bubble on the ground for 10 seconds that reduces magic damage taken by 20% for everyone in the bubble. This can be an insanely valuable tool to have in encounters that have high magic damage, which we tend to see a lot. In those situations, you could say it's the best DPS utility in the game. It's really nice that Death Knights are getting something other than Death Grip to help solidify a spot in a group. Love this change, and I'd love to see more specs get stuff like this. As for some Frost specific changes, Frostworm's Fury is baseline now too. You know, the big ice dragon thing. It makes sense to me for this to be baseline, considering how flashy and iconic it is, and you can't be mad about having a giant AoE nuke to use every once in a while. The talent that's taking the place of Frostworm's Fury is a brand new ability called Hypothermic Presence. It's a 45-second cooldown that reduces the runic power cost of your abilities by 35% for 8 seconds. To be honest, this talent doesn't excite me very much, because Frost doesn't really depend on spending runic power quickly for most of its damage. Only time I can really imagine this talent being useful is in a build with Breath of Sindragosa, extending the amount of time you can be in each breath. So maybe it'll be cool that way. Although, is anyone else getting a little tired of breath builds? Just me? Anyway, the other big changes are mostly flavor things, but one of them is something Frost DKs have been hoping for a while. They can now use two-handed weapons again. And Blizzard even added a passive that gives Obliterate a damage buff when using a two-hander to try to balance them with one-handers being able to have 2 rune forges. Not bad. Frost hasn't been able to use two-handers since before Legion, so I bet this change is going to make a lot of people happy and nostalgic about their DKs from back in the day. And I'll be curious to see which weapons come out on top. The last big flavor thing is that 5 new rune forging options have been added. They don't do anything really crazy for Frost, but the new rune of Hysteria, for example, increases your runic power by 20 and gives you a runic power generation proc. Another thing that doesn't really do much for Frost, unless you're running a breath build where it could be worth a lot. It'll be interesting to see if any of them become more useful than the old ones. So with all those changes, the baseline single target rotation generally boils down to keeping Remorseless Winter and Pillar of Frost on cooldown, spending runes on Obliterate and using Howling Blast when it procs from Obliterate, and spending runic power on Frost Strike. The AoE rotation is kinda unfortunately similar, just also keeping Death and Decay on cooldown. The reason I say unfortunately similar for the AoE rotation is because I think it exposes a flaw in the base design of Frost. Without particular talents, you don't have a great way to spend runes or runic power to do AoE damage. So you almost entirely depend on talents like Frost Scythe and Glacial Advance to gain extra abilities that actually do AoE. These talents are awesome and fun to play with until you end up in a single target situation where they're generally worse than your baseline abilities and you feel like you have 2 dead talents. And ultimately, this is one of the big reasons why builds with Breath of Sindragosa have been so popular and strong. It turns all of your resources into AoE damage, but it's also great in single targets, so it feels like a win-win. And then you build all the rest of your talents, stats, and legendaries to buff your breaths, and it ends up playing entirely different than any other build you could use. This is one of those things that a lot of people won't mind about the spec, but I just wanted to mention it in case it doesn't sound like your cup of tea. And I'm honestly not even sure how I'd want Blizzard to go about changing the spec either, so it is what it is. With that, I think Frost is still in a good spot for Mythic Plus and raid viability. If Breath ends up being the best build, it'll be insane for high uptime cleave and AoE situations. And even without Breath, it has talent options to excel in single target or AoE situations, so the flexibility is definitely there. As for utility, it's only been improved with the addition of Anti-Magic Zone. So with that, Death Grip, a Battle Res, Anti-Magic Shell, and a great single target stun talent, Frost has decent utility to back up its damage potential. Overall, I think people who have enjoyed this spec in the past couple expansions will definitely be happy with the improvements that have been made so far. I'm excited to see what the Covenant abilities, legendaries, and soulbinds bring to the table for Frost too. Either way, I think this spec is looking the best it has in years. Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon for making this video possible. If you liked this little review, give us a like, and feel free to check out any of the other specs I cover. And let me know in the comments or in our Discord which specs you want to know about next. Links to everything in the description. See you next time.